Thanks for tuning in to Operation Revenge. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin the story. The first thing I noticed when I walked into that dining room was how warm everything felt. Not the temperature, but the atmosphere. Everyone was already seated, laughing, glasses raised. I was the outsider walking into someone else's celebration. My name is Darla, I'm 38 years old, and I live in Chicago. I said that in my head as I stood in the doorway, like I needed to remind myself that I still existed here, in this family that had learned to operate without me. Mitchell's voice carried over the table, smooth and loud, like he was narrating his own victory parade. When I take office as mayor, we're going to revamp the entire downtown initiative. Small businesses will thrive. You'll see my name in the paper every week. He grinned at our parents, soaking up their approval like sunlight. I slid into an empty seat near the end of the table. My sister Mara gave me a quick smile, nervous and tight-lipped. She was the one who had texted me about this dinner, saying I should come because Dad would like it. Her tone made it sound like she was doing me a favor. Yvonne, my mother, set down her fork slowly. "Oh, you made it," she said, her voice polished like marble. "We weren't sure your schedule would allow for something so traditional. Family dinners aren't quite as glamorous as your jet setting, I suppose." I swallowed hard. There it was, the first jab of the night. I used to coordinate crisis logistics in disaster zones around the world. Earthquakes, floods, war-torn regions. But to her, that was just me being irresponsible. "It's been a while," I said evenly, forcing a smile. "Thought I'd stop by for Dad's big night." Dad didn't look up from his plate. He sat rigid, shoulders squared like he was still at the office, pretending the silence made him untouchable. Mitchell chuckled. "Big night? Oh, come on, Darla, you didn't hear? This dinner's about my campaign kickoff. Dad's retirement is just a footnote. He says he's done, but I told him, once I'm in City Hall, he'll have a corner office if he wants it." "Mitchell," Mara muttered, but he ignored her. Yvonne leaned toward me, her eyes soft but cutting. "And you? Are you still doing that thing with relief supplies? Must be exhausting to run around like that with no real stability." "I still work with the International Disaster Coordination Bureau," I replied. "We focus on logistics for high-risk zones." Sounds noble," she interrupted, in a way that made noble sound like poor. I gripped my water glass, trying not to let the heat rise to my cheeks. Then, halfway through Mitchell's story about how he single-handedly secured a corporate endorsement, the front door opened. A man in a crisp courier uniform walked in, holding a black envelope. He looked around the room and spotted me. "Ms. Darla Renner?" he asked. The table went quiet. "Yes." He stepped forward. "Message from the bureau chief. Urgent delivery." He placed the envelope on the table in front of me, his posture stiff, almost military. "You're requested at headquarters immediately. High priority consultation." Mitchell blinked, confusion flickering across his face. Yvonne's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Consultation?" Dad finally spoke, his voice low but sharp. The courier straightened. "She's on the chief's advisory panel for emergency response. We need her expertise. It's confidential." He nodded, then turned and left without another word. The silence that followed was electric. Mitchell's smirk had vanished, replaced by something tighter, disbelief, maybe even anger. Mara glanced at me with wide eyes, like she was both proud and terrified. "Well," I said quietly, pushing my chair back. "Enjoy your dinner." For once, no one had anything to say. My apartment felt colder than usual that night. It was one of those places that looked like it belonged to someone who never really lived there. White walls, a couch that didn't quite match the coffee table, and a kitchen with nothing but instant noodles and bottled water. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed for a while, letting the silence settle. The envelope from the courier sat on the table, unopened. Whatever the bureau wanted from me could wait a few minutes. My mind was still stuck back at that dinner table, at the look on Mitchell's face when he realized I wasn't the failure he always painted me to be. I stood up and went to the storage closet in the hallway. There was a bin on the top shelf, covered in dust, that I hadn't touched in years. I pulled it down, coughing when the lid stuck. Inside were old files, contracts, assignment letters, and a small stack of unopened envelopes from the bureau. One of them caught my eye. It was dated 6 years ago. My name was written in a careful, official script. My stomach twisted as I tore it open. "Congratulations, Darla Renner," it began. "You have been promoted to Senior Coordinator of Field Operations, with full access to cross-agency command." I sank to the floor, staring at the paper. I had never seen this letter. Someone had intercepted it, tucked it into this bin, and left me believing I had been overlooked. The first person I thought of was Mitchell. He had always found ways to overshadow me, to keep me in the background while he grabbed the spotlight. But this felt calculated. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to Ria's number. She was an old colleague from my days in the bureau, sharp, reliable, and one of the few people who hadn't treated me like an afterthought. She answered on the second ring. "Darla, it's been forever. Are you okay?" "Not really," I said, my voice shaking. "Did something happen at the bureau 6 years ago? Anything that might have derailed my career?" There was a pause. "Why are you asking this now?" I told her about the letter. "Darla," she said slowly, "we've had a major breach. Confidential relief data was accessed using credentials that belonged to you, me, and Nolan." "Nolan?" I asked, my chest tightening. Nolan was our ex-teammate. Brilliant, paranoid, and always skating on the edge of trust. "Yeah," Ria said. "This happened just before the mayoral gala. Whoever did it knew exactly where to strike. If someone framed you back then, this could be connected." I stood up, pacing the room. "You're saying this sabotage didn't just start now?" "It might never have stopped," Ria replied. "Be careful, Darla. Someone's playing a bigger game here, and I think you're still on their board." Her words settled in my gut like lead. I wasn't just digging up old wounds. I was stepping into a trap that had been waiting for me all along. 2 days later, I was standing at the edge of a gravel driveway somewhere outside of Rockford, staring at a rusted Airstream trailer half hidden under a canopy of trees. The place looked abandoned. No lights, no sound except for the low hum of cicadas. This was where Nolan had supposedly gone to disappear. I knocked on the metal door once, then twice. "Nolan, it's me, Darla." Nothing. I was about to try again when the door creaked open just an inch. A single blue eye peered out. "Darla?" His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. "Yeah, I need to talk." The door opened wider, but only after he scanned the woods like someone expecting snipers. He looked rough, unshaven, hair tangled, wearing a faded hoodie that might have been older than me. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, motioning me inside. The trailer smelled of burnt coffee and stale cigarettes. Papers were scattered across a small table, schematics, old bureau memos, and maps with red X marked all over them. "You've been off-grid for years," I said. "Why?" He gave me a long look. "Because someone's been cleaning house. People like us? We're liabilities once we know too much." I leaned forward. "Ria told me about the data breach. They're saying it came from us. Did you—" "No," he said sharply, cutting me off. "I didn't touch those files." He reached into a drawer, pulled out a small notepad, and scribbled something. Then he slid it across the table. On the paper, in his jagged handwriting, were the words, "They're framing both of us." Before I could ask what he meant, my phone buzzed. Ria's name lit up the screen. "Darla, you need to hear this." Ria's voice came fast and tense. "The footage they used to pin the breach on Nolan? It's fake. Deep fake level manipulation. Behavior patterns don't match. It's high grade." I glanced at Nolan, who was watching me with wary eyes. "Did you hear that?" I asked him. He gave a bitter laugh. "Of course it's fake. That's their style. Erase the operatives who know too much, make them look like traitors, then no one asks questions when they vanish." Something cold settled over me. "Who's doing this?" Nolan hesitated, then lowered his voice. "You know how the Bureau used to talk about shadow contractors? The ones who cleaned up messy operations? I think they're back. And this time, they're using your brother's campaign as cover." The mention of Mitchell sent a sharp pulse of anger through me. "You think Mitchell's tied to this?" "I think he's part of a bigger machine," Nolan said. "And if you keep digging, you'll be next." I pocketed the note and stood. Then I guess I'd better keep digging fast. Mitchell's campaign office looked like a startup crossed with a luxury car dealership. Every wall was plastered with his face, grinning confidently next to slogans like, "Mitchell Renner, a new era, and integrity for the future." I walked in without an appointment, ignoring the perky receptionist who said, "Ma'am, You can't go back. There without... I pushed through the frosted glass doors anyway. Mitchell was in the middle of a photo shoot, sitting on the edge of a sleek desk, his tie perfectly knotted. A photographer clicked away while some assistant fluffed his suit jacket like he was royalty. Darla, Mitchell's face tightened the second he saw me. What are you doing here? Interrupting, I said flatly. The photographer glanced at Mitchell, confused, but he waved him out. The assistant scurried after him, leaving just the two of us in the glossy, sterile room. You always did have a knack for drama, Mitchell said, straightening his tie as he sat down behind his desk. What's this about? Did you come to tell me about your urgent work? He made air quotes around the words, smirking. I pulled a folder out of my bag and dropped it on his desk. This is about Canyon Trade. The smirk faltered. What? Don't play dumb, I said, leaning forward. I know you've been meeting with them. I know they're connected to the bureau breach. And I know their money is flowing into your campaign. Mitchell laughed, but it was too sharp, too fast. You sound paranoid. I'm running for mayor, Darla, not staging a coup. I don't know what conspiracy you've cooked up in that little apartment of yours, but it's not healthy. I stared at him, my pulse pounding. You intercepted my promotion letter years ago. You made sure I stayed invisible while you built this shiny image of success. Did Canyon Trade help with that too? Mitchell's smile hardened, his voice dropping to a controlled, icy tone. You think I care enough to sabotage you? Darla, you've always been the family's, well, you. Always chasing disasters, running into places everyone else wants to leave. It's not exactly a career that wins dinner table applause. I didn't have to sabotage anything. You buried yourself. His words stung, but I didn't let it show. I hope you're rehearsing that speech for the ethics board. Because once I prove that Canyon Trade is buying your campaign with stolen relief data, your career will go down in flames. I stood up, sliding a small device under the edge of his desk, while he was too busy sneering at me to notice. What was that? He asked, eyeing my hand. Nothing you need to worry about, I said, with a cold smile. But I'd start practicing damage control if I were you. I left his office without waiting for a response, my heart racing. The recorder I'd planted was running. If Mitchell slipped up, I'd have his corruption on tape. And that was only the beginning. Rhea showed up at my apartment just after midnight, her hair still damp from the rain and her laptop tucked under her arm. If we're doing this, she said, stepping inside without hesitation, we need more than hunches and family drama. We need hard proof. Taryn was already sitting at my kitchen table, tapping away on her tablet. She looked up when Rhea came in, her sharp brown eyes full of equal parts guilt and determination. We've got pieces, Taryn said, but nothing that ties Canyon Trade directly to Mitchell's campaign yet. We need a timeline, money transfers, donors, back-channel deals. Then we build it, I said, pushing aside my empty coffee cup. Tonight, we spread everything across the table, my promotion letter, copies of Nolan's notes, the bureau memos Rhea had managed to dig up. Taryn pulled up Mitchell's campaign donor list, her fingers flying over the screen. Here, she said, pointing to a cluster of names. These 3 donors are shell companies. I can trace at least 2 of them back to Canyon Trade subsidiaries. Rhea leaned over her laptop, scanning the data. And look at the dates. Every time there's a spike in his campaign funds, there's a corresponding breach in relief operations data. The money flows in right after the stolen information is sold. The realization hit me like a punch. He's building his political career on the backs of people suffering in disaster zones. My work, our work, Taryn hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. There's something else I need to say, she murmured. Rhea and I both looked at her. A few years ago, Taryn said, her voice low, I killed a story about you, Darla, a story Canyon Trade planted. They gave me doctored reports that made you look unstable and reckless, like you botched missions and got people hurt. I didn't publish it, but I buried it. I thought I was protecting you, but I also silenced you. The air felt heavier. I didn't know what to say. You believed it, I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. You thought it might be true. Taryn winced but didn't deny it. I'm sorry, I should have told you years ago. I took a long breath and nodded. Well, now you can make it right. We take all of this, every data point, every fake company, every forged transfer, and we show the world what's really happening. Rhea clicked open a folder on her laptop. I traced the digital forgeries from the data breach. They didn't originate from Nolan. They came from a subcontractor tied to Canyon Trade. Whoever's running this operation is covering their tracks with layers of fake credentials. But I found enough breadcrumbs to connect them back to Mitchell's biggest donors. I stared at the screen, feeling a fire build in my chest. Then we have a case. We just need one more push. Something undeniable that links Mitchell directly to Canyon Trade. Rhea nodded. I'll work on decrypting the remaining data. There's something in those files they don't want anyone to see. If I can expose it, we'll have a smoking gun. Taryn leaned back, crossing her arms. And I'll start drafting a story. Not the kind of PR Mitchell can wiggle out of. I'll show the public exactly how his campaign is funded by Black Ops contractors who sabotage disaster relief for profit. Good, I said, because I'm not letting my brother bury me anymore. The three of us sat in silence for a moment, the only sound being Rhea's keyboard clacking. I glanced at the pile of evidence on the table, a messy but undeniable map of lies and betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't alone. We set up in Rhea's lab the next evening, a small windowless space tucked beneath an old co-working loft in Chicago. The walls were lined with servers, monitors, and tangle after tangle of wires. It smelled faintly of ozone and burnt coffee. Rhea was already hunched over her workstation when I arrived with Taryn. Everything we have on the footage is here, Rhea said, pointing at the largest screen. A grainy video froze on a frame of Nolan's face, or at least what was supposed to be his face. The timestamp matched the breach window exactly. That's not him, I said, shaking my head. The way he moves, his left shoulder dips when he turns. Nolan's never had that posture. Rhea gave me a grim smile. Exactly what I thought. Watch this. She hit play. The footage showed Nolan entering a secure data vault, swiping a badge, and plugging a device into the server rack. It looked seamless, too seamless. I ran a behavioral match, Rhea continued. This isn't just a basic deepfake. The algorithm they used replicates muscle memory and microgestures. It's next level. Taryn leaned closer, frowning. So, someone's not just framing him. They're building an entire synthetic version of him. A digital phantom. Not just Nolan, Rhea said, pulling up another clip. This one was even more disturbing. A partial clip of me, supposedly handing over access credentials to someone in a dark parking lot. My stomach knotted watching it. That never happened, I said firmly. I've never even been to that location. Exactly, Rhea said, pausing the frame. Look at the shadow angles. They don't match the light source. And the voice? Listen. She pressed a key and my voice played back. This is all we need to finish the job. Taryn shook her head. That doesn't even sound like you. It's been run through an audio morphing tool, Rhea said. Whoever's behind this isn't just trying to ruin you and Nolan. They're rewriting reality itself. I took a deep breath, fighting the tightness in my chest. So who's running this? Canyon Trade? Rhea hesitated, her fingers tapping on the keyboard as she ran another trace. A waveform appeared on the screen. There's something embedded in the audio, a faint background voice, someone giving instructions. She enhanced the sound until we heard a cold, clipped tone. Clean this up. Make it disappear. My skin prickled. Who is that? Rhea's face went pale. I ran the voice print. It matches a man known only as the designer. Taryn raised an eyebrow. That sounds like something out of a bad spy novel. It's not, Rhea said flatly. The designer is ex-intelligence, a strategist who specializes in manipulating narratives and destroying reputations. He's been off the grid for over a decade. People thought he was dead. But guess what? He's back. And guess who he's working with? I didn't need her to finish. Canyon Trade, I said. Rhea nodded. And by extension, your brother's campaign. I stared at the screen, at my falsified image frozen mid-frame. My voice twisted into a weapon I never wielded. This is bigger than Mitchell. He's just a pawn. Exactly, Rhea said. But if we can expose the designer, we can collapse the entire structure. Canyon Trade, Mitchell, all of it. Taryn leaned back, arms crossed. Then we need a plan. We need to get this footage in front of the right people, unedited, with proof of forgery. We burn them with their own lies. I met their eyes, feeling a surge of resolve. Then let's set the fire. The night of the Civic Integrity Gala was all gold and glass. The kind of event where the air itself felt expensive. I stood just outside the main ballroom, adjusting the worn field jacket I'd deliberately chosen over an evening gown. My boots were still scuffed from my last field mission, and the bureau medals pinned to my chest weren't for decoration. Let them see me for what I really was. Not a politician, not a polished socialite, but someone who earned every scar and accolade. "Are you sure about this?" Ria's voice crackled in my earpiece. She was stationed in a surveillance van a block away, her laptop feeding live streams of the gala security cameras. "No turning back now," I murmured, watching through the glass doors as Mitchell took the stage, his smile plastered on, like a campaign poster come to life. Taryn's voice cut in next. "We've got eyes on the Canyon trade rep. He's the guy in the gray tux standing near the bar. The device we found on him is still active. We'll handle it when you give the signal." "Copy that," I said, pushing open the door and stepping into the ballroom. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd as I walked past tables draped in satin. The kind of tables that cost more than my monthly rent. People stared at my jacket, at the dirt smudged on my boots. Some of them even looked scared. Mitchell's speech faltered for half a second when he saw me. He quickly recovered, chuckling into the mic. "And now we have a special guest. My sister Darla, always the dramatic entrance." I stopped halfway to the stage, holding up a stack of small black cards. "You're right about that, Mitchell. I do have something special." I tossed the cards into the crowd like confetti. They were QR flyers, each one linked to a secure drive, holding everything we'd uncovered. The fake footage, the donor records, the proof of Canyon Trade's connection to his campaign. "What the hell are you doing?" Mitchell hissed into his mic, his polished smile finally cracking. "Showing them who you really are," I said, my voice loud and clear. The first phone started buzzing as people scanned the codes. Gasps spread across the room as images and audio clips began playing. The deepfake footage, the forged transfers, the voice of the designer saying, "Erase her. Erase them all." Near the bar, Ria and Taryn moved in. Ria discreetly disabled the small transmitter she'd detected earlier, a device Canyon Trade had planted to monitor and possibly sabotage the event. Taryn filmed the entire takedown, ready to release it online if anyone tried to spin the narrative. Mitchell tried to grab the mic again, his voice rising. "This is all fake. She's unwell. She's always been unstable." I stepped onto the stage, cutting him off. "I've spent my life saving people you don't even think about, Mitchell. And while I was risking my life in disaster zones, you were busy selling stolen data to contractors who profit from tragedy. You think you can paint me as a failure? Tonight, everyone gets to see the truth." The big screen behind us suddenly flickered. Ria's feed took over, displaying a final clip. The designer himself, his voice chilling as he spoke over audio we'd decrypted. "Darla Renner was always meant to fall. She's the test case." The room went dead silent. Even Mitchell looked rattled. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone, my voice steady, "meet the man who's been pulling strings. The man my brother chose to work with." The silence broke into a chaotic hum. Reporters firing off questions, guests pulling out phones, camera flashes popping like fireworks. Mitchell's campaign manager lunged for him, whispering frantically. And just like that, the perfect image of my brother's campaign shattered in front of a room full of witnesses. 2 days after the gala, I sat in a dimly lit hearing room that smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. The federal ethics panel had gathered behind a long wooden bench, their faces impassive but alert. My hands rested on the stack of evidence we'd compiled. Hard drives, printed memos, and Ria's meticulous timeline of the data breaches. "Miss Renner," the chairperson began, his tone sharp but not unkind, "you understand the gravity of these allegations, both against you and against your brother's campaign?" "I do," I said, my voice steady. "Then let's start with your involvement. There are records, forged or not, showing your credentials were used to access highly sensitive relief data. Do you admit any responsibility?" I looked down at my hands for a brief second, then back up. "I admit that I signed off on operations early in my career that, in hindsight, were compromised by corporate interests. I admit I didn't push back hard enough when I saw the red flags. But I did not breach any system, and I did not betray the Bureau." Ria stood to my left, holding a sealed envelope. "We have additional evidence to submit," she said firmly. These memos prove that Canyon Trade manipulated access credentials. Not just Darla's, but several other operatives. They used advanced spoofing and synthetic video to frame her and Nolan Miller. The panel murmured among themselves as the documents were passed around. On my right, Taryn stepped forward. "I'm here as an independent journalist," she said. "Years ago, I buried a story about Ms. Renner based on false intel provided by Canyon Trade. I take full responsibility for that. But I verified the evidence we're presenting now, and I can confirm its authenticity." The room was silent except for the shuffling of papers. The chairperson looked at me again. "And Nolan Miller, he submitted a confession last night, not of guilt, but of coercion. He claims that both of you were targeted as part of an internal purge. Is that true?" "Yes," I said. My throat felt tight, but I forced the words out. "We were marked for elimination because we knew too much, because we wouldn't look the other way." For a moment, the panelists just stared. Then the chairperson nodded slowly. "In light of this evidence, we're clearing you of wrongdoing. Furthermore, we are launching a federal investigation into Mitchell Renner's campaign and Canyon Trade's operations." The words hit me like a rush of cold air. Relief, but also a reminder that the fight wasn't over. Rhea placed a hand on my shoulder, smiling faintly. Taryn exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. As I gathered my papers, the chairperson leaned forward. "Ms. Renner, you've made powerful enemies. But after this hearing, you also have powerful allies. Use that wisely." I nodded. "I will." The house was quieter than I remembered. No campaign chatter, no sharp comments from my mother floating in from the kitchen. Just the smell of old wood and dust. Mara met me at the door, her eyes red and tired. "He wanted you to have this," she said softly, holding out a plain white envelope. Her hands trembled as she passed it to me. "I found it in his desk after everything." I took the envelope, my throat tightening. "When?" "Yesterday morning," Mara said. He must have written it before the retirement dinner." I walked into the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch that still had the same faded floral pattern from my teenage years. Mara sat across from me but didn't speak. She knew I needed a moment. My fingers slid under the seal, tearing it open carefully. The handwriting inside was familiar, shaky but deliberate. "Darla, I never said much when I should have. I thought silence meant strength, that holding my tongue would keep the family together. I see now that it just made you feel alone." I swallowed hard, my vision blurring. "I was jealous of you." There, I said it. "You had a fire I never had. You went places I wouldn't dare go. And every time I saw you pack your bag for another mission, I felt smaller. Like the walls of this house were just proof that I'd never done anything as brave as you." My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading through me. "Mitchell took after me. He talks, he charms, he takes the easy path. But you carry the hard things. I didn't know how to tell you I admired that. I just wanted you to come home once, not as the outsider, but as the daughter I could be proud of without words." Tears slipped down my cheeks. I'd spent so many years believing he saw me as a failure, as the family's stubborn ghost. "I am sorry. For every time I stayed quiet when I should have defended you. For letting your mother's words go unchecked. For not being the father you deserved. If this is the only way you hear it, then let it be clear. I am proud of you, Darla, more than I can ever say. Dad." The letter slipped from my hands and landed on my lap. I sat there, stunned, while Mara quietly wiped her own eyes. "He wanted you to know," Mara said. "He talked about you a lot more than you think." I nodded, my voice catching. "I wish he'd said it while he was still here." Mara reached over, resting her hand on mine. "At least you have it now." For the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not just for the battles I'd fought, but for the silence I'd carried all my life. The ceremony wasn't flashy, no red carpets or champagne toasts, but it felt real. Rows of chairs lined the courtyard outside the Bureau's Chicago field office, filled with people who actually understood the work I'd done. Soldiers in dress uniforms, aid coordinators, medical teams. The kind of people who ran toward disaster instead of away from it. I stood at the edge of the crowd, tugging at the sleeve of my field jacket. The medals on my chest felt heavier today, not because of their weight, but because they finally meant something again. "Darla Renner," the bureau chief called, his voice carrying over the microphone. For years, you've operated behind the scenes, coordinating the most difficult missions in places most of us will never see. Today, we recognize not just your service, but your resilience, your refusal to let lies define you. I walked up to the podium, the applause like a distant hum in my ears. When I reached the stage, the chief handed me a small plaque. Nothing extravagant, but the words engraved on it hit me harder than I expected. For integrity and leadership under fire. Thank you, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my throat. This isn't just for me, it's for every person who fought to get the truth out. Even when it would have been easier to stay silent. It's for the ones who keep working in the shadows, making sure people get what they need when the world is falling apart. I'm proud to stand with them, with all of you. As I stepped back from the podium, I saw Rhea and Nolan standing together near the front row. Nolan gave me a small nod, the kind of nod that meant, we made it through the fire. Rhea smiled, holding up her phone, already documenting the moment as if she knew it was the first of many to come. Taryn was off to the side, leaning against a column, her tablet tucked under her arm. Enjoy this while it lasts, she whispered when I walked over. Because the story about the designer, that's just starting. I've got a full investigative series ready to roll. His name's going to hit the news within the week. Good, I said. The world should know who's been pulling strings in the dark. We stayed for a while, talking with old colleagues and bureau staff. But eventually the crowd thinned out. I slipped out of the courtyard and started down the sidewalk, the cool evening air brushing against my face. My phone buzzed. A single text, no name attached, just a number I didn't recognize. Level 2 protocol triggered. The designer moved again. I stopped walking. The city lights reflected in the screen, casting a pale glow across my fingers. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. I stared at the message, my mind already racing. If the designer was shifting his operation, it meant he was anticipating our next move. It meant we'd shaken something loose. And now he'd come at us harder. I slipped the phone into my jacket pocket and glanced up at the skyline. Chicago was alive and buzzing, unaware of the storm still brewing beneath its surface. But I wasn't the same woman I'd been weeks ago, the one sitting quietly at that humiliating dinner table. I was ready for whatever came next. With Rhea, Nolan, and Taryn at my side, I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was coming back with fire.